Hi, I'm Matt Mulvaney from Explorer, and this presentation is called An Assessment of Apex 5.1 Interactive Grid. Who are Explorer? Well, we are an Oracle Platinum partner. We are multiple award winners. We've got dedicated Oracle teams. We are a UK team of Oracle experts, all based in one site, one head office in Leeds in the UK, and we have Oracle engineered system practice, and you can see by the image below we're celebrating over 20 years of being in business. So here are our services in terms of development and database support. And moving on, more about myself. I'm Matt. I've got many years experience in Oracle technologies. Now this includes Oracle Forms and Reports, working throughout my career with PL SQL, and over the last few years specialising exclusively in Oracle Application Express, and myself and Explorer who work across various business sectors. So my main responsibilities include being a trainer, a speaker, a blogger, a consultant, and ultimately I am a developer as well, and I take these opportunities to promote and enthuse about Oracle Application Express. So in a background to this presentation, I've done quite a bit of research. My views and opinions are on the latest edition being Apex version 5.1.1. Now in my research I've been creating one of the Explorer courses, which is specialising exclusively on the interactive grid. This is a 2-day 59-page course. So in my research I've been looking at the documentation available. I've been using the interactive grid in 5.11, and also I looked at it in depth in 5.10 as well. I've created dozens of interactive grids, and I've been following closely the sample interactive grid application as well. So a lot of my knowledge has come from working with interactive grids, working with the APIs, and also following John Snyder's blogs as well, the 4-part blog series on the interactive grid. Okay, so for those of you who don't know what an interactive grid is, it comes in two real flavours. So there is the non-editable interactive grid. You may create this by default if you create one of these region types through the wizard, and you've also got the editable version as well. So moving between the two, it should be quite simple. Depends on your query, but it should be a case of just sliding the editable from no to yes to make your non-editable interactive grid now an editable one. So what this means is your interactive grid in non-editable mode will show a report of data. Now this is very similar to an interactive report, and we'll go into the similarities and differences a bit later on. Edit mode allows you to hit an edit button or double click in the record, and then you're entering an edit mode, and you can change any of the values in any of the columns that are available to the user. Now you can protect those columns, and you can protect some rows from editing as well. And to make the user experience even better, you can change some of the item types to the item types you will be familiar with, such as number, date picker, select list, even shuttle and text area, even some of the larger item types. It also supports plugins as well. Okay, so if we look at the main features of each of the versions. So in the non-editable side, we've got all interactive grids are searchable. It's very similar to interactive reports. You can search across the whole grid, or you can search within certain columns, and you've got some more advanced filtering options as well. You can customize the interactive grid. You can highlight rows. You can have alternate reports. You can use the new charting functionality. So you've got access to the new jet charts, where previously and in fact currently in Apex 5.1.1 interactive reports still use the AnyChart charting technology. The number of customizations you can do is quite wide ranging. You can change some of the values declaratively through the attributes in Page Designer, or you can refer to the custom JavaScript section, and by using the configuration you can add much more in terms of pagination or turning features on or off. All columns are rearrangeable. This includes moving columns around from left to right and includes column groups as well. So column groups are a new feature which allows columns to be assigned to a group or removed from a group or even assigned to a different group. On the editable side, every interactive grid which is set as editable, you'll be able to add records to the bottom of the interactive grid. You can modify any records that we're talking in terms of updates there, or we can do some refreshing, resetting of the data. We can even revert some rows back to their previous state, or we can refresh them from the database as well. So that gives you an overview of what the abilities of the interactive grid are capable of. Okay, on this slide I want to demonstrate the size of the features. Now this is, in my opinion, this is comparing the size of the features from the interactive grid to the likes of the interactive report and also to the Oracle Forms data block. Now the Oracle Forms data block is something which you couldn't natively do in Apex until Apex 5.1. So for those of you unfamiliar with the Oracle Forms data block, this allows for certain modes. So you've got enter query, you execute query, you can cancel the query, you can put in wildcards in the first row of your data block, for example the underscore or the percent sign, and you can execute that query and just return the rows which match that wildcard set in. It also supports very fast keyboard navigation in terms of tabs, page down, and scrolling around with the arrow keys as well. So as you can see from the circles on the diagram, the interactive grid is really dwarfing the other region types in terms of functionality. You can see that the interactive grid doesn't eclipse totally the interactive report. This is because some features are missing. So for example, subscriptions are missing, so users can ask for a frequent digest of the report, so they could ask for the report weekly or daily, or it supports many other frequencies as well. If you want the interactive report to send you a copy of the report by email, that's currently not available to the interactive grid. Neither are compute columns, so the user can, in an interactive report, add new columns to the side of the interactive report to perform their own calculations. For example, you may have a first name and a surname column. You can concatenate the two together to create a full name column, or you could take a salary column and divide by 12 to get a monthly salary column. So those are now at the present time available only to interactive reports, and so is the ability to group by a couple of columns and also pivot the data. Pivot being a new feature to interactive reports in version 5. So in terms of functionality, the interactive grid in the newer versions of Apex, so I'm expecting in version 5.1.2 or version 5.2, the size of that circle to increase in size and to totally eclipse the features available within the interactive report. In terms of eclipsing all the features within the Oracle Forms data block, well, I think it's got all the features, in my opinion. And if you're holding back moving to Apex because of this multi-record data block facility, then now's the time to move and start to look at interactive grid and see if it can solve your business requirements. Okay, let's move on. So what are available? What features are available for the interactive grid? So I've written on the right hand side what those main features are. Now I'll just go through them really quickly. But in terms of column grouping, we've got that as a new feature. We can rearrange columns, we can rearrange groups. We've got the fantastic new charting functionality from the Jet JavaScript framework, and now that's all native within interactive grid. We can perform many data modifications. We can perform those automated update modifications, or we can use more complex PL SQL driven modifications using a PL SQL type region, PL SQL process. We can protect rows, we can protect certain columns. We've got master detail or master detail detail or N level of master detail sections, and in my opinion, in my my experience, that has worked extremely well. We've got many more pagination styles in comparison to the interactive report. The classic report in comparison has lots of pagination styles, but the interactive grid has even more. It's heavily customizable. We can have several menus. We have a row level menu and we can have a column header menu, and we can push new buttons into there and we can remove others. It can support non-SQL based columns, so columns which do not originate from your SQL query. So I remember on occasions I've selected a column called null from my query just to repurpose that column. Now you don't need to do that. Interactive Grid supports plugins, it supports client-side validations, it supports server-side validations by the editable region attribute. It's got lots of browser events. I'm expecting more in the new releases, and if you want even more features, look at the advanced configuration section. There's plenty of features within there. So I wanted to spend a bit of time looking at the interactive grid from two angles. So as developers, we are very familiar in turning Apex regions and functionality into productive applications. But when we give those applications to the user, they will be seeing these region types for the first time. They'll be seeing the interactive grid for the first time. And what concerns me is that if I give an interactive grid to a user, is it going to make their job even better, even easier, or is it going to be difficult, and is it going to be a struggle for them to use? And it depends on the functionality. It depends on the scenario where I'm going to employ this interactive grid. So we'll start looking at the user's point of view. So let's look at it in terms of pros and cons. So in terms of pros, in my opinion, it's a massively powerful visualization of their data. Not only have they got charts, they've got the icon view, the report view for custom reports, and they can visualize their data. They can edit very easy. The charting functionality is vastly improved. Not only does it look better, but there are way more charting types available than we had previously, and it's very forms-like for this single one-page editing and viewing of your data all on one page. Now, think of it in terms of Apex 5, where typically we'd have an interactive grid with an edit button, and then we'd load a page to configure the information on the form. We'd press save, the dialog would close, or the page would branch, and we'd go back to the refreshed interactive report. Now, that looks very Apex 4.2 to me, where we had the rendering and the page structure on one page, and then we had to drill down into information, change the attributes on a page, save the page, and revert back to the rendering, to the page items and regions. So now we've got everything on one page. It supports master detail, just like Oracle Forms. It's got lots of flexible pagination styles, as I've covered already. Now, in terms of the cons or the areas the interactive grid can improve on, is that in my opinion, a user coming from Oracle Forms to Apex, they would experience laggy keyboard shortcuts. And I'm thinking in terms of the undos and the redos. Interactive Grid does support them, but often it's not clear if the users actually clicked undo or redo. They may hit the button several times and might get lost of where they actually are. For the menus, there's an awful lot on the menus. Sometimes it's unclear what a feature does to a user. For example, what does refresh row do in comparison to revert row or revert changes? There are some menu related bugs that we're experiencing, especially on the single row view, and the last two can be read in cooperation. We're seeing that users are panicking when they've done several changes. Now, you think of it in terms of the interactive grid runs over several pages. We have master detail involved as well. They've created several records, updated a few, maybe deleted a handful, and they get a bit lost. They don't know what they've changed. They want to reset, undo all the changes, go back to view mode instead of edit mode. They don't know what to do, and they press F5 or they refresh the page and everything's back as it was. Now, I'm seeing a bit too much of this, and I'm familiar with it myself. If I'm developing and something's not going quite right, F5 just seems to fix it, and I think I shouldn't be having to do this. Okay, so let's demonstrate the interactive grid. So I'm going to log into the sample interactive grid application, which is a package application. If you've not already tried it, I recommend trying this. There's lots of good information in here. So I'm going to click on reporting, and then we'll click on basic reporting. Okay, so we can see an interactive grid here. We don't have column groups on here, but you can see that I've got this solid line here. So if I was to just resize the browser, let's go a little bit more, you can see the first two columns have been frozen. So very like Excel there. So that's something the users would appreciate, the facility to freeze certain columns. All this is done by the menu there. We can decide to unfreeze the column or freeze more columns. Let's expand that. So we've seen this in reporting mode. So we don't have access to an edit button. We don't have access to a save button, for example. Let's look at column groups. So with column groups, you can see that the column header is double dip in size. So we can see the column heading and the column group. We can rearrange columns. So let's pick manager. Try that again. So you have to be very careful of where you're positioning the mouse pointer. So I picked manager and moving it. Now, as you can see, the tooltip says department. So I'm going to drop that there, and I actually picked the wrong column by mistake. So this is, in my opinion, a little bit fiddly. I wanted to pick manager, not department. Let's try that again. Now I'm picking hire date. Let's try manager again. That's not working. Try it again. I'm dragging department. So I think that's an area that could improve. Let's try a column group. Notes. Let's bring that across to the side. Now that's worked that time. Now I'm tending to see this issue whenever I'm dragging a column from right to left. Let's try manage again. Now I'm grabbing manager and dropping it where I like. When I've repositioned the columns, I can reposition them further using the columns, and I can use the arrow keys here to drag them up and down. And when I'm happy with the report, I can always press report and save that as the primary report for all users, or alternatively save as a private or an alternative report. Very similar to interactive reports. Now the report save and save as works fine as long as your page isn't a public page. So currently you cannot save an interactive grid on a public page, which is quite unfortunate for one of the applications we have at Explorer, where it's a list of phone numbers. we'd like to show that on a public page. We don't see a need for staff to log in to see see phone numbers. So we have a few workarounds for that, but that could be improved in the future. Okay, let's have a look at the editing facility. So on editing, let's start simple. Let's start with basic editing. So on basic editing, I can see the values in read-only mode. Now let's change something. Let's click on edit. Now when I click on edit, the button gets darkened. For me, it's sticking into the page. It's showing me that I'm currently in edit mode. Now the field I had highlighted was a switch. Okay, so we can change that from yes to no, or from a no to yes. In fact, it's quite difficult to for some users to tell whether it's actually yes or it's a no. I was visiting a client in fact 2 days ago, and they were saying that needs to be clearer for them. On the salary, I can tell this is a number field because it's right aligned. It allows me to change the salary. Let's up that slightly. Commission is also a number. Now this is defaulted to a date picker, or the user can change it to a date picker. The manager changed to a select list. The job changed to a radio group, and the name is a text field. You can also have a text area there. Oh, that's a select list. This is a text area for medical leave. Now sometimes it's quite difficult to change something and then acknowledge that change. So for example, let's try pick someone from a radio group. So I'm going to pick Adams is now a manager. So I've changed it. So what do I do now? How to make this disappear? Well, there's an X here, so I can press that. So when I press X, I get this strange box here. So what happens now? Do I click in there? Well, that's doing nothing. Do I click there again? Well, it's manager. So what do? Do I press tab? Tab seems to work. If I choose analyst, enter, that's not really working. Do I click off? That seems to work as well. So it's a bit of a learning curve trying to find exactly how to navigate off items. For select lists, I think this is quite simple. You can just change that and it changes it straight away. But for certain item types, it can be just a bit of a learning curve. Right, you've also got the menus here, so I can maybe delete that person and I can save. So when I press save, it saves my update, any rows that I added, and the deletion as well. Right, let's delete another one. So I've deleted the wrong person, so how do I undelete it? So let's try Ctrl Z. Didn't work, try this again. Didn't work. Okay, so how do I undelete? Where's the undo button? How do I undelete? So I click that. Let's try refresh row. That seemed to work. Let's try delete row and revert changes. That seems to work. So it's a bit of a learning curve trying to find out some of the core functionality which a user may need to use. Okay, let's press save and move on to validations. So on this validation, there's a row validation that commission must be less than 1.5 times the salary. So I'm going to put the commission really high on here. In fact, really high on here. And move off. Now there was no client-side validation, although client-side validation is supported in the interactive grid. Now this is running a validation which is server-side, and it's telling us straight away that this value is too high. If I press save, I have an error on the interactive grid. I can see there through these little red ticks that something's gone wrong. I have an error on the page as well. It's this first phase client validation is telling me I'm not going to try to submit it again because there's errors on the page. Okay, so I need to set that back, and that should work now. Okay. Right. Developer take-up. So I'd like to see how many people have actually got an interactive grid in their production application right now. Now, the reason why I'm asking this is I'm sensing a bit of reluctance to adopt the interactive grid. Now, this is just my own opinion. Now, in Explorer, I can sense that. Now, I like the interactive grid. I think you should all be using it. I think there's some things to learn about it. It's unlike any region type that we've got at the moment. So there's just some things to explore, to research, to find out how it works. Yes, there are bugs that I'm seeing, and yes, there are some complexities, and I'll come on to that a bit later on. But I'd like to find out how many people are embracing the interactive grid and use it in their production applications. Now, just to back up that reluctance that I'm sensing, after listening over the last few months, here are some of the feedback that I'm receiving about interactive grid. So the first one, I'm not even going to use an interactive grid. I'm just going to use interactive reports. It's not worth using an IG due to the bugs. Now, this person saw bugs in 5.10, saw those fixed in 5.11, but also saw a few introduced in 5.11 as well. They were also had some issues with the layout of interactive grids. They were forever changing the column widths, changing the size of things, saving the reports, and all their problems went away once they used interactive reports. So that's one opinion. Quote number two, the task took so much longer because I was using interactive grids. Now I can understand that. I can sympathise with that somewhat. With anything new, there is always a learning curve to using interactive grids. If you want to look at some of the more advanced features, then you need the JavaScript config, and to use the JavaScript config, you need to know what settings are available and how to find what you want. The situation right now is that they're using the APIs to configure your interactive grid. I would like to look at the documentation, although there isn't currently those documentation. So we are relying on code samples within the sample interactive grid application and any blogs from John Snyder's, and is very visible on the Oracle forums as well and helping as well. Number three, I heard this more than once. I've copied the SQL out of the interactive grid, I've deleted the interactive grid, created it again, and it worked. Now, yes, I've seen that on more than one occasion. I've seen it where an interactive grid, for whatever reason, decided to have a select list down the column. Now we tried to hunt for this select list, we couldn't find it. We took the SQL out, we recreated the interactive grid, and it worked. We've seen interactive grids not saving because of problematic column. We changed the column name, and it worked. We changed it back again, and it worked. So some of the things just cannot be explained, and we're having to undo and recreate things, which we shouldn't really be having to do. As a developer, if something went wrong, I'd like to find out what went wrong, change an attribute, parameter, setting, line of code, and it will work. I don't expect the whole of the region type to be recreated to make this work. And also my favourite quote, the last one, Matt, in your professional opinion, should we be using interactive grids? Now the person who said this they ran into an issue, asked me to come over. I came over, I was on site at that time. We discussed two different workarounds, and he decided he was going to try the first one. If it didn't work, he was going to try the second one. Just before I left his desk, he said, "So that's your professional advice then? You advise us to use the interactive grid?" And yeah, I do. I advise you to use the interactive grid. There's a learning curve, there's some things to know about it. Your experience will increase and you'll have these code samples to look back at, and you can refer to those. Okay, so for developers, the pros and the cons. So the pros are there are an incredible amount of options if you are prepared to use the JavaScript API. So you can use the demo code, you can use the Explorer course, and you can use any of the blogs, pull it all together, and you've got a like a hub of information there to grow your experience from. It's straightforward to make an IG editable. Yes, it's a very, in most cases you can change a yes to a no. If it's a single table, if it's got a primary key, it's quite easy to do that. There are use support of plugins, item type support including plugins, and we've seen the star rating, for example, with one of the plugins. If you want to write a plugin for the interactive grid, especially the item type, you need to make it interactive grid aware. I think you need to change some of the validation aspects of that. But yes, you can run a plugin in an interactive grid. Now the cons, many options are not declarative, so it goes back to that first point if you're prepared to use the JS API. There's a blur between simple and advanced. So what you think is simple to do is quite tricky. What you think is going to be tricky to do is going to be quite simple. So yeah, don't be put off. Look at the coding examples. One of the cons, there's a lot of rearranging. It's all a little bit too big. It's a bit too wide. It runs off the side of the screen. If you have page level pagination and it's set to auto number of rows, it's just a little bit too high. You need that little bit of scrolling to see your records. It's largely undocumented. In my opinion, missing some of the interactive grid events, especially the before save event. So I would like to use before save to run my own validations, and only if the validations pass will I want to run my issue the save action. And lastly, interactive reports are still required because there is some missing functionality. Subscriptions, group by reports, pivots, they're missing. Now, I wanted to find a gauge chart and looked on Google Images, and I found this, and where the needle lies, it is about right for me. It's definitely on the easy side when you look at interactive grid for most of the things. Now, that gauge could go from all the way into green or all the way into red. It depends on your situation. So I want to look at the developer side of things, and especially this blur between simple and tricky. So let's go back to the demonstration. Right, let's try add a toolbar button. So what we've got here is an interactive grid. This is a non-editable one. We have a create button here which calls a modal window, and we can put some values in. Press create. It closes down, refreshes interactive grid, and you can see your record there. Now, simple or tricky? In my opinion, this is tricky. So just to add that button there. In an interactive report, that would be simple, because I drag the button on, put it into right of interactive search bar, and there would be my button. But in interactive grid, I think this is tricky. Let's quick edit that button. I can't seem to pick the button. This is because the button does not actually exist as a button in the rendering side on within Apex. So the button is actually drawn when you create your interactive grid. So let's look at the attributes for the interactive grid, and right down to the bottom we've got the JavaScript config code. Now if you're unfamiliar with JavaScript, now this might be a bit scary. So what it's trying to do is define a set of variables. So we're grabbing from the config the toolbar data set. Now the toolbar data is a series of arrays. So this will be an array of a few items, this will be an array of a few items, and this will be an array of one or two buttons. So we're grabbing the last toolbar group, we're going to define a new button which we'll add, a hot button, and then we're going to push that create button here onto the end of the last toolbar group, and then we're going to set the toolbar to be our working toolbar data set. Then we're going to define the actions of the button. Now, if our name matches up with the action, we can define an action. Now, this is running the click action on this hidden create button. Now the reasons for doing this is that the URL is already prepared on here, so you won't run into any checksum issues. What I tend to do is write my JavaScript function in there. If I want to run any PL SQL, I can call an AJAX callback. In fact, what I like to do is kind of keep this simple as possible, so I can run my own JavaScript function perhaps, or trigger a dynamic action event, and that's a good approach actually. So that allows the toolbar button to be added and appears in there. You can play with those arrays, really input it wherever you want, but in my opinion that is quite tricky. Yeah, quite tricky to do that. Now let's do something easy. Let's try custom server processing. So on custom server processing, we have a select statement over several columns. There's several different values here. Now by default, an interactive grid which is editable will be set to use automatic row processing. This is using the region source, but if it was a set of tables you needed to edit, insert into or create, you would use the PL SQL code. If I click there, it gives me a little bit of help of what I can use. So I can grab that piece of PL SQL code and paste into there. So this is a very good example here. So if C, which is creating, then insert into these tables, into this table, and I can use the colon system to indicate which columns I'm going to use. Yeah, as long as I set the editable region to be my interactive grid, I've got access to those columns. Then I need to return the row ID. This is an important step. If I'm updating based on the primary key. In fact, that if you're using a primary key instead of row ID, you would use the primary key in there. And then finally, when deleting, then use the delete statement. Now, tricky or simple? For me, this is simple. You know, this is PL SQL. This is what developers are aware about. They normally have a PL SQL background anyway, and this is quite straightforward to do. So that's an example of easy. Let's have a look at paginations. So paginations, we can have traditional paginations. So these have got page 1 or page X of Y. You can have total rows, gives you X, Y of Z. Down there, you've got number of pages. Now this shows by default as an automatic number of pages. We've seen 5 here, but it can be changed through the configuration. Now let's have a look at load more. So this is a type of scroll. So if I scroll down, I can get to the bottom. It looks like I've got 40 rows there. Scroll right to the bottom, press load more, and we've now got another 40. So we've got 80 rows there, and we can keep pressing load more. So easy or tricky? Let's change that. So is that easy or tricky? Well, I would expect to click on the region type and find the pagination. In fact, it'll be on attributes. The pagination, scroll or page. Was this on scroll? So where's the load more? Well, the load more is not there. It's actually on the custom JavaScript code. So let's have a look at that. Now let's remove a few things that we don't need. We can remove that. We can remove that. So that's the bare bones for JavaScript configuration. So here I'm expecting the config in, and then I'm going to change the default grid view options, and I'm going to set the pagination load more to be true, and that's all you need. That's only a little bit of code. Is that easy or tricky? Well, I would prefer not to use that, even though it's only 9 lines of code. So I think that's slightly into the tricky side of things. Yeah. It's also worth noting. Just cancel that. It's also worth noting that in pagination there is a new scroll pagination style. So let's see how this works. Now I need to be very careful on this. Let's scroll down. So I'm scrolling through records. And in fact I can see all my records here, and as I scroll down it seems to get the data as and when I need it. So I scroll down pretty quick there, and it's just trying to catch up. And in fact, if let's go back a bit, yeah, it's caught up now. It was still loading those records. And when I saw this, I'm thinking, why would you need scroll as a pagination style? When would I ever want to scroll through all of my records? Want to scroll through 4,000 records? Wouldn't I just give up and use the filters here? If I was searching for someone here, I could just search using the search bar. So I was looking at Twitter at the time, and I was looking at Twitter and looking at some blogs and scrolling through my feed, and I was thinking, when would I ever want to use this endless scrolling? And I thought, I'm actually doing it now. I'm actually looking through Twitter, scrolling up on my phone, not looking for anything in particular, and that's perfect. So if you're not looking for anything in particular, you want to browse through your data like Facebook or Twitter, or look at, I don't know, some image galleries or something, that is endless scroll is probably something that you want to use. Okay, so that covers the main points really. So when to use the Interactive Grid, I remember we had a Meeting Explorer before Interactive Grid was launched, and we were trying to think of ideas when we could use the Interactive Grid and when not to use the Interactive Grid. Now the Interactive Grid has been out for about 6 months. My views changed somewhat. So I would say definitely use it when you're using single or multiple table modifications. So any type of modification. Single works great. Multiple table, if you can use the region type, so it's either a specific table or if it's a PL SQL code, I think use it for that. Lookup tables are ideal, especially master detail tables. So you might have a list of types. So types, for example, a person's title. That might be the master title. In the detail, you might have Mr., Mrs., Professor, and so on. In my opinion, I would use the interactive grid or the non-editable interactive grid as an IR replacement. If you can, try it. I would try it. In the proceed with caution area, public pages. We talked about that earlier. Any type of cross-record validation. Now I've got a blog for this. Now, when would you want to use cross-record validation? If you want to ensure that for example, you've got a user table, you want to ensure that you've only got one admin or at least one admin, or for example, you're checking for duplicates that the user might have added. If you want to do any of that cross-record validation, that's firmly in the tricky area. That's quite hard to do, but not impossible with the APIs. Proceed with caution if you're looking at a huge data set, thousands of records or hundreds of columns. Proceed with caution there, and think, would it be better off as a form? If you're going to edit a record, would it traditionally be a form where, based on some data elements, you would hide and show dynamic elements of that form? It's not possible to hide and show a column in an interactive grid, not dynamically. So if you think it would be better off as a form, then probably interactive grid is not the right region type to use in that scenario. Something we've seen a few times is these what are called strike-off records. So say you have an interactive grid and it's full of tasks. Now you might have a column on the end which is a select list, which it changes to complete. When you change it to complete and update that record and refresh the interactive grid, that would no longer appear because your tasks only show you the non-complete records. If you do that, the interactive grid is expecting that record still to appear because it's an update. It's a grid. It's not expecting that record to disappear. If that record disappears, error. You see an error on the page. So it's not suitable for those strike-off records. Now, I think the Apex team are looking at that, and that will be resolved in a later version. Proceed with caution for heavy customizations. If you want to heavily customize your interactive grid, warning, proceed with caution there. Right, in summary, a thumbs up for the interactive grid. Use it. It's unlike any other region type, in my opinion. It's only going to get better. I've looked at the code. It's 16,000 lines of JavaScript code. It's just going to get better. So in my opinion, use both the interactive grid editable and non-editable types. The overall difficulty, once again, warning on that, tricky versus simple. I think with a little bit of experience you can find your way around interactive grid very easy. Is it production ready? Yes. Quick answer, yes, it's production ready for your applications. Is it a replacement for the Oracle Forms multiple record data block? Yes, it is. This is the tool to use. Don't consider tabular forms. Use the interactive grid. It's so much better. It's so much more functionality than tabular forms. Is it a reason to move from Oracle Forms to Apex? Well, in my opinion, that move is a bit overdue, because Apex was ready a long time ago for your forms migrations. Okay, so that's in summary the presentation. So I'll leave you with a final slide. Now this is a screenshot of our website. I'll just point you out, in the bottom we have the URL. It's www.explorer-development.uk.com, and you can reach me on the email below. And right at the top there you'll see there is a link to our blog. The blog we update at least once a month with any technical findings or advice, or might be a mini blog, or even a video blog. We keep that updated at least once a month. In fact, the norm is about 2 to 4 times a month. So that's the end. Thank you for your time.